Hi, everyone. This is Lynn Crawford from Hope. Welcome tonight. I am so pleased to introduce Anne Richardson to you. She is from Nurture Your Journey. Anne is a board certified chaplain. She's a spiritual director, a Labyrinth facilitator, and a Rieke Master, as well as a writer and award-winning poet. Her years working in hospice deepened her understanding of grief, loss, and life transitions. This sparked her passion for creating intentional space for people to listen to their own stories and inner voice. She established Nurture Your Journey in 2016 with a vision of creating safe and sacred spaces for others to reflect on life's transitions. She offers workshops, retreats, and individual spiritual direction, as well as resources to professionals. Anne sees herself as an apprentice to grief, a wise mentor in living life fully. Being close to the earth grounds her, and if you follow her blog, you will often see references to her experience of being in nature. She says she's very grateful to Hope for the opportunity to present, and we're very grateful to her. Just a housekeeping item. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll see that she gets them. Anne, welcome.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and I'm going to be going to the screen share pretty quick and for the PowerPoint, because you don't want to be looking at my face all night when I have lots of information to share on the screen share. So I'm going to go there because I know you're going to just be looking at me in a tiny box. So let me go to play. Here we go. So, and I'm going to do a little adjustment on this top of it. It lets me. No, it's not going to let me. Okay, start playing this. Well, I welcome, and for the next 90 minutes, I want to invite you to shift from being a caregiver to a care receiver, knowing that for however long you've been on this journey with dementia, you are giving and giving and giving, and I want this to be a time for you to receive. This time is for you. First, I want you to think about make a cup of tea or some water or some coffee or whatever you like to have by you right now as you settle in and just kind of get kind of comfy. And you might consider having some pen and paper by you. I want this to be as experiential as we can make this, even though we're not in a room together. So you might be writing, it might be a few notes, or I'm going to have some experiences where you can actually write for yourself also. I do want to make one assumption. As I did this presentation about 18 months or so, of course, we were gathered in a room together, and the PowerPoint would have been behind me, and I don't like to read off of these slides and try to make them more engaging, and I don't like to read off of them now. So I'm going to have some notes in front of me, but I want to acknowledge that we have a shift. We can't be all in a room together because of the pandemic, because of COVID. Well, the upside is some of you may not have been able to come to a room to gather with us. And so some of you may not even be from the Portland Metro, Vancouver area. You may be far, far flung. So welcome from wherever you are. You'll get to see me and I can't see you. So I'm going to just imagine you all wherever you are coming from. I also want to make, I think I can safely assume that the pandemic has shifted your life in many, many ways as you have become caregivers in this new way of being in the pandemic. And it's made things much more complex. So I want to acknowledge that this has been a year of exponential loss. So let's just take a moment before we start to sit and acknowledge all that's unfolded this year. And you can take a minute to imagine that everyone here is gathered together in this circle. And take a breath in and out. And in and out. It's likely that the pandemic has accelerated or intensified some parts of your life concerning your loved one. In some ways, perhaps you've become more isolated from the pandemic or become separated from the person you care for if they are living in a memory care community. Perhaps you haven't even had time to consider grief with everything that's been unfolding. So again, let's take another breath in and out. When you do your exhale, take slightly longer to exhale. It's been shown that for our sympathetic nervous system, the exhale actually activates calming. And I don't know about you, but when I do a presentation, I get a little nervous. So I could use a little calming right now. So let's just remember that. And I think about everything in this year, and even the word breath and breathe. As we learned about COVID, when we first heard about it, it affected the lungs. And breath all of a sudden took on new meaning. And then we heard about George Floyd and I can't breathe. And the word became more complex. And then where I live in the Pacific Northwest and all up and down the West Coast, we had the wildfires in August and September. And our air quality became very, very dangerous. And breath and breathing became harder and harder. So like a journey with dementia, everything takes on more and more complexity, and loss takes on more complexity. So this has been a year of exponential loss. So the pandemic, if anything, has been an awakening for us all. So back in February, I read an article in the New York Times that I think will resonate with many of you on your journey with dementia. That will make you maybe feel less isolated and may make you go, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. So I'm just going to highlight some things. For those of you who have the person you deal with and your loved one, whether it be a spouse or a parent or a friend who lives in a memory care community, all of a sudden you have this dividing line where one day you were able to visit and the next day, no, you weren't. And they had signs going up in there where they couldn't hug anymore. And their caregivers within that place were having to try and keep people apart, and the confusion that was taking place there. Maybe you were trying to make phone calls, or they had tablets and you were trying to communicate that way, but that didn't always work either. That was confusing. This, I think, is very important and oftentimes goes unrecognized. But with dementia, you as the caregiver are often a kind of extension of the mind of the patient. You know the history, you know the hobbies, the loves, the passions, the hobbies that people enjoyed, the work they did, their likes, their dislikes. When someone gets to a point in their dementia journey where they can't speak for themselves, you can fill in those spaces. And when that's taken away by what's happened in the pandemic, especially, then you aren't there to fill in those gaps. So that was a loss that happened this year. I found this when I used to visit as a hospice chaplain, and I would go into these memory care homes and communities, that often a caregiver, the spouse, the child that would visit, I'd go at meal times sometimes to help with our patients that were on hospice, or because when you come on to hospice, it's not always just that last 28 or 48 or 1 week. Sometimes people are on for an extended period of time, several months. And so I would come in and be involved in the community, and especially in memory care centers, the spouses, the family members that would come in and they'd help with the feeding and the bathing and the activities. And you get to know each other and you know the other residents, and you are a support system to the staff. And when memory care places had to close down because we didn't know how to be safe during this early part of the pandemic, and they're now just starting to open up with the vaccine, that safety net was taken away too. So I just want to acknowledge just what a critical part you are of the system of care, that you are an essential part of dementia health care. By the way, I'm trying to change my language. I just read this just last night. It's from Kim Campbell, who was Glenn Campbell's wife. I think it's really important. She said, "I never say I put or placed my husband in a home or facility. Those terms feed a negative stigma that keeps people from getting the help they need. I say, our family joined a memory care facility, or memory care community, I'm sorry. Our family joined a memory care community. It was our community too. We lived each day with families on the same journey. We laughed together, we cried together, prayed together, and supported each other. If this disease becomes too difficult to manage at home, being part of a quality memory care community should be your first choice, not your last resort." So I'm trying to change my language around that. You know, when we had to chart in our notes, facility was our go-to word. But I like that, a memory care community, because that's really what you are. You're a community supporting each other. For those of you caring for someone in the home, you may have noticed then, well, there was an uptick, surprisingly, not surprisingly, in the Alzheimer's Association's 24/7 helpline, where you're trying to help the person with dementia know they have to wash their hands or wear a mask when they went out. Maybe your go-to to get respite was to take your loved one to an adult daycare program, or to have professional nursing aides come in to help with bathing and other tasks around the home. And that all of a sudden was taken away, not knowing who is it safe to have come into your home. People were reaching the breaking point in this, and so they call and ask for help. At the very bottom of the slide, I found this particularly poignant, where it says, in Philadelphia, a woman bought a roll of wallpaper with a bookshelf pattern on it and pasted it over the inside of her front door to confuse her husband and dissuade him from wandering outside where he might get too close to people. So just the lanes that people went to try and keep themselves safe in this last year, and to keep their loved ones and their families safe. And so these are statistics you're probably already very aware of, but just the increase we have in Alzheimer's and other dementias, and that the system of dementia care is broken, and you are part of the network of unpaid family caregivers, and that you undergird the already underpaid caregivers. So I just want to,
excuse me.
Yeah.
We have a note that someone says that it's difficult to hear.
Oh, okay. Let me speak up and scoot in a little closer. See if that helps.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I have a little bit of a quiet voice. So I just want to really, really affirm just how important you are and how difficult this journey is. And that this year in particular has been very, very difficult. So in the beginning, this book, Help Is Here When Someone You Love Has Dementia, was written by Marion Hodges, which is a doctor out of Providence, and Anne Hill, who is an attorney whose mother had dementia. And after their journey, they realized that there needs to be a very concise book. And I highly recommend this book. And it has a whole section, small section, it's not a big book, easy to reference, on caregivers. And what it says is when a family member is diagnosed with dementia, the entire family suffers a shock, and everyone in the family begins grieving. Everyone in the family begins grieving. Each person in their own way and on their own timeline. Even though the family member with dementia hasn't died, there's no getting around the fact that the family member has been diagnosed with a progressive, incurable disease that can be emotionally traumatic. Dementia can be particularly difficult because families often feel like their family member is slipping away one brain cell at a time. And in some ways, families are right. So there's a lot in that paragraph, those two paragraphs, about what you get when you're just starting on this journey. Take that in. Just at the beginning of the diagnosis, there's a shock, the beginning of grieving. It can be traumatic. So I'd like to just take a moment and just sit with what I read. Think back to when you first heard the diagnosis. Perhaps you already suspected something. I know I did with my mother. And you're beginning your grief journey. And let's take, again, a few breaths in and an exhale. An inhale and an exhale. Perhaps you're playing the scene over again in your mind of what those early days were like. Again, an inhale and an exhale. Okay. It's the wrong way. So a little bit about how our time will unfold from here. So we're going on a journey because dementia is a journey. We're going to have some definitions and we're going to go on these breathing breaks. I'm going to unpack that a little bit about what those are. I'm going to encourage you to reflect on your losses because that often you don't have time for that. Also, just take in what you need today. You know, this is time for you to receive, and you may only get one or two things out of this. I'm going to have my contact information at the end. You can always reach out to me and say, no, there's a lot in there, and I only got one thing out of this. That's all right. The only thing you take out of this is just learning how to take that exhale that can calm you down. Then that's all you need for today. So just take what you need. I just want you to really practice kindness and gentleness for yourself. And then there's time for questions at the end. And I've also told Lena if you have questions, if you want to break in, if something seems pertinent to come up, like asking me to speak up, please do. And I have some exercises where hopefully we'll be able to. I can't see the chat on my screen, so we might have to break in and allow for some chat in here. So for some of the exercises. So we'll play this out. And so what is a breathing break? It's a time I invite you to take these deep breaths again. Just check in with yourself emotionally. Just see what's coming up. Do you feel sad or anxious, drained, angry? I have a whole list of emotions later. Some resentment, whatever's coming up. Numb, that's an illegitimate emotion. There are times to check in with what's going on in the moment of each section of what we're doing. Check in with your body and see what's going on physically. Perhaps you're feeling tense, tight in your throat, stomach hurts, shoulders are heavy. Also, see if you're just kind of checking out. Not as a judgment, it's a point of curiosity. Maybe you're worried about your loved one right now and you wanted to be here today, but you're also somewhere else. So it just allows for present moment awareness. And also just to practice this breathing. Maybe it's something you don't do on a regular basis. Oftentimes in our world, we do a lot of shallow breathing and we don't take time to do deeper breathing. So that's what our breathing breaks are. Again, a little bit about who I am. Lynn read most of this, just to say that I am someone whose mother had Alzheimer's, and we just passed the 3-year anniversary of her death. She lived in assisted living. She was married or widowed 32 years, never remarried, and I was her primary emotional, spiritual support. My brother lived out of state, so he helped when he could, but most of the responsibility fell to me. Now, if you could type in the chat box, if you feel comfortable, who are you? Are you a partner, an adult child, sibling, friend? Maybe let other people know who you are. What are your current living arrangements? Are you living with the person who has been diagnosed with dementia? And how long have you been living with it? Are you new to this? Or has it been a 5-year, 10-year journey? Sometimes this can be a very long journey, and sometimes some of you may be very new to it. I'm going to see if I can peek up there.
Good. So we've got adult child, child, spouse, granddaughter, spouse.
Okay.
The granddaughter says she's lived with my grandma for 8 years. She's had dementia for a few years.
Oh, thank you.
We live at home for the past 3 or 4 years. Wife of 48 years, living with my husband in a single family home. Diagnosis finally 6 years ago, but much longer. Spouse, 13 years. My wife of 55 years has come down with dementia. Adult child. Partner of my wife who was diagnosed in 2016. Wife of spouse in care. Living at home. My husband, we are in our own home, maybe 5 years. Adult child. Spouse, living at home, 16 years.
Wow.
I am the daughter of a dementia patient who passed away 3 years ago. I work in a nursing home.
Wow.
Live at home. Adult child, own home, 8 years. I am an adult child, the only child. My mom lives in a memory care community. Mom was diagnosed about a year ago, but her dementia has been increasing for the past 5 years or so. Adult child living 4 years with 2 parents with cognitive impairment. Partner diagnosed a year ago. Planning to move in with my mom who has dementia. The wife of 34 years, diagnosed in 2017. He is 90, I am 65.
Wow.
Son and daughter, diagnosed 6 months ago. Diagnosed about 2 years ago, but coming on for more years. I'm a spouse. Issues began 4 years ago, considered mild cognitive impairment, but clearly progressing. My mom lives with my husband and myself, and this has been 3 years with the last year in mid-stage. I am an only child. Living alone after caring for my husband for 1.5 years, no current reliable backup personal support. Family lives in California and is unable to help.
Thank you, Lynn. So many stories, and I can tell there's some more coming in. So you can see you have such a variety of different stories, and yet that common thread of dementia, the time spans, the family, all different backgrounds. Wow, thank you so much for sharing those, everybody. Appreciate that. Thank you. Why is my There we go. So here is one of my favorite, actually, definitions of anticipatory grief, because it's so concise and so true. Stuff is looming. Stuff is looming. It's by Jessica Thomas in a presentation I went to a couple of years ago. And it's so true. You're living in this moment, but you know stuff is coming at you down the track. And so you're living in this tension all the time. So stuff is looming. And the invitation with dementia is how to stay in this present moment with stuff looming, how to have this conversation with dementia, with the looming and the now. That's the invitation that we have, this conversation of being with the dementia, with the person who has it, with the stuff looming. The longer definition of anticipatory grief, and this applies to any kind of grief for someone who has an illness that is life-limiting. That could be with the cancer, with ALS, with Parkinson's, any of those kind of diseases that don't have a cure, that lead to an end-of-life diagnosis. But when you're caring for someone over time, you start to grieve that person before they die. So this may be your experience. You grieve the loss of that person's former self. This may be something you've been noticing on your journey now, that you may be remembering, but they were like this and they're not like this anymore. That's grief. You experience the loss on a daily basis, and you anticipate that loss of end of life. You know what it's coming, and that can be just as painful as the loss associated with death. Caregivers may experience a sense of guilt or shame for wishing it was over, or it was already, their loved one was already gone. And these emphases are mine, but especially when we see someone who is at the end of life, they can't care for themselves anymore. They see all their daily needs being taken care of, and they were used to that person in their life being a very vibrant, engaged. For us, we project onto that and wish it was already done, and that is normal. I really want to emphasize that wishing it was over is normal, right? We don't know what's going on inside behind its own dementia, whether they're okay with where they are. And so it's okay for you to wish it was over. I know with my mother, there were times that I thought, oh, I wish this journey was done already, right? And then you feel guilty about it. So that's all part of the journey. And ultimately, anticipatory grief is a way of allowing us to start to prepare emotionally for the inevitable. It can allow for us to start to resolve maybe some issues and do some contemplation. I don't know if any of you out there have perfect families that have always gotten along, like the ones in movies in the 1950s, where everybody got along and resolved everything at the end of the sitcom. I don't know very many families that are like that. I just finished a 4-month series on principles of collective trauma healing, and most families I know have some issues. So when we know something's coming along, we can start to maybe make some headway into resolving some things if we'd like to. One caveat, of course, is with dementia, it may be more one-sided, though I have seen some amazing experiences when I was doing hospice, with even holding the phone up from a estranged son to a mother, and him offering forgiveness and her being able to let go. So some amazing things can happen, even when we think someone isn't cognitively aware enough. That can happen in these situations. And also, we can make those plans for end-of-life planning and funerals and do advanced directives. And this is where I take a moment to get up on my high horse and say, you don't need to be in a situation of being at the end of your life to be having those conversations about what you want done for your end of life. Everybody can have an advanced directive and a will. So I've already done all those conversations with my kids, and we revisit them on a regular basis. So anticipatory grief does not replace the grief you have after your loved one dies. There is no solid research one way or the other that says it replaces that grief. So that was a lot about anticipatory grief. So again, just check in with yourself. Any emotions coming up as you think about the stuff that might be looming in your life, as you think about dementia and you read about it, and you, like you said, you might be at a midpoint on the journey, or you're starting to see a decline. So that stuff is looming. Ask yourself, what's looming? And now do that check-in. Let's take just a few breaths and slow down and breathe in. And then a breath out, a little longer on the exhale. And breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Did you have anything for me, Lynn? Did I hear you?
No.
Okay, I heard something.
We're good.
Okay. And just take a moment to check in with yourself and be kind, be gentle. As you go into this next section on ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss dovetails, or if you had a Venn diagram, I would say they have a big overlap.
You guys can.
Ambiguous loss is, there's two types of ambiguous loss, and the one that is part of dementia is when a person is physically present but psychologically absent, when people incrementally disappear. And Pauline Boss, a psychologist, is the one who coined the term about 40 plus years ago. And her book is Loving Someone Who Has Dementia. And her husband actually has dementia, and she's the primary caregiver. He lives in her home. So she's an expert, not just from a PhD psychologist standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. She says ambiguous loss is complicated loss, and therefore the grief is complicated. Complicated because, of course, it comes in small pieces, right? And it goes along on a journey. But I think this is important because in our society, we want to make grief a pathology, but it's not. Your grief might be complicated, but you're not ill, and it's not pathologized. Your situation may be chaotic, and it might be painful, and it carries on for a long time. So your grief is going to carry along like that too. So you grieve along the way. So it's a chronic grief for an incremental death. So she says part of what helps with ambiguous loss, what can help with that, is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time. Now, this is something we tend to struggle with in our society. We like to have finite answers and solutions to things, right? And that's hard to do with dementia. So let's say with dementia, she says this right in this interview, that they're there, but they're not always there. You might have these good days where you're almost wondering, like, really, what's going on, especially in the early stages. And then you come back another day, or another day is not so good. So they're not there. And that's the closest to the truth you're going to get. So you have to hold those two ideas in opposition. And she says that she's discovered that's very useful for stress reduction, if you can be comfortable with holding those two truths at the same time. And what she's learned in her work with people is that if you can learn to live with that, with the ambiguity of that loss, you don't have to like it, you don't have to embrace it. But if you decide to live with it, It gives you a sense of agency and that you don't have to feel helpless in the face of it. So if you go to On Being, which is a podcast, you can go back and listen to her whole interview, or just that little piece of an interview on July 17th where she did a follow-up conversation. I found it really helpful in learning more about living with ambiguous loss. So another one of these breathing breaks, because that's a pretty big concept, ambiguous loss. So as you consider the ambiguity of your loss, how comfortable are you with holding two opposing views? That your loved one is both here and gone. So again, let's do another check-in, another breathing break. How are you doing emotionally and physically? And where are you in your mind? So 4 breaths. And one more. Again, be sure you're taking care of yourself, drinking some water or a sip of tea, stretching if you need to. Just make sure you're comfortable. This time is for you. This is a labyrinth. And I find the labyrinth is a wonderful way to reflect the dementia journey. Now, if you're not familiar with the labyrinth, I do want to say a lot of times people use the word labyrinth and maze together, but the labyrinth isn't a maze. There's one way to the center and one way back out. You follow the same path in as you follow out. There are exceptions, but it's not a maze. It's not designed to trick you or turn you around, even though you might feel that way sometimes with dementia. And while I use the labyrinth as a metaphor for the dementia journey, let me call it this next slide, is that some days you may feel like you're lost and that you're not on the path at all. But you are. You're on this path. And you're not doing it wrong. I always say to people, you're making your best choices. You're making your choice with the information you're given in that moment. There's lots of choices I might have made differently if I'd gone back to my life and had the information I had in this moment, but I don't have that. So you have the information in front of you and you're making that choice and taking those steps that you have in that day. If you look back on that labyrinth, there's very long stretches. And you can't see me pointing at this, obviously, because it's on the screen. But there's very long stretches, and they'll feel like they go on forever. And this can be comforting or unsettling. But you might get into a routine, and you're like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. But then some turns are sharp, and you'll feel unbalanced. So you'll see we have those sharp turns. Maybe you're going along and then there's a fall, a stroke, a change in behavior. You're like, oh, okay, we were going along pretty good and now something's going on. You will eventually reach the center, which will be the death of your loved one. You'll notice that others are walking the path. Perhaps you see them clear across the other side of the labyrinth and you're going, whoa, they seem like they have it so together and I feel like I'm stumbling along, or I wonder what information they can share with me. This is part of that being in community. Perhaps you entered the same time as your family, but then you all seem to be in different places. I love that book, Help Is Here, because you might have a sibling that lives out of town, and they call and talk to mom on the phone, and they say, well, mom seems fine to me. I don't know why you're so needing so much help or whatever. Right. And you're going, well, you're not here every day and you don't see the day to day. So sometimes conflicts arise in families. You're on different parts of the journey. You're grieving differently. You may want to call out for guidance from across. You're on different parts, families at different paces. Others are walking very slowly. Like you heard some people say they've been doing this journey for 8 years, 15 years. Other people, the decline is coming quickly. So everybody has their own pace. So that's what the labyrinth has, its own pace. And I always say, when you're in the center, when death has finally come, when your loved one leaves this embodiment, then you can stay there as long as you need to grieve that initial death. And then you can come back out at your own pace. So I did see some questions come up in the chat. Lynn, is there anything somebody needs to clarify on?
John says, I think I'm better able to understand the ambiguity of the two conflicting ideas. We are together and enjoying life at the same time as life is slipping away. Wife struggles so often with her reality, her awareness of her slipping. Watching, sharing that pain with her is quite hard on me. It seems like I carry those feelings longer than my wife, who tends to forget that grief.
Oh, nice.
And then the other is from Hillary, who says, I'm so glad you're doing this. I'm nervous, happy, freaked out, and scared. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you for writing in the chat and sharing your experiences. I think the more we can share the experiences, though the journeys are unique for each person, there's also affirmation when we share those, that there's commonality too. So what I'd like to invite you to do right now, Lynn sent out, and you may have had a chance to print out a copy of this, but you may not have. So I don't know how big a screen you have at home. I'll leave this up. And what I'm going to do is play some music for about 7 minutes. And if you have a little tip, however you feel comfortable doing it on your computer screen, I'm going to invite you to walk this labyrinth at your own pace, imagining it as your dementia, the journey you're on with dementia. You might actually think about it as your dementia journey so far. Maybe you're at the beginning and you're imagining what it'll be like to do the whole journey. Maybe you just want to do it and see what it's like to be relaxed. It'll be different for each of you. We had a little trouble with the music, so I have this little speaker thing, and I'm going to turn it on. It's going to say it's connected to my iPhone, and it's a bit annoying, but I'm going to try and get the music loud enough. The main thing when you walk a labyrinth, even if it's a finger labyrinth, is there's no wrong way. You might be tracing it, and you actually might get turned around and end up at the entrance before you reach the middle, and you haven't done anything wrong. Actually, that feels that way with dementia too, right? You get a bit confused. You might actually connect with your loved one as they get confused. So I'm going to give this a try. It's a little easier when I do it in person, or I do it in workshops and we're actually looking at each other on the screen. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to try this here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the speaker.
Battery 100%. Connected to.
So it's chatting, and I'm going to give you about 7 minutes. First off, does anybody have any questions, or did that make sense?
I do have one more comment, which might be useful before going into the labyrinth.
Oh, thank you.
And that is, Gloria says, my husband doesn't believe he's ill. He's constantly telling me that I've imprisoned him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds very difficult. and how you hold that his reality against your own reality. Yeah.
And Sue says, this is helping me move past the anger I felt for many years about Alzheimer's stealing our retirement and leisure years together. I traced the labyrinth, and when I got to the center, I was finally able to cry with the sadness I've held at bay just by being angry.
Oh, thank you. See, you're already there. We're not even there yet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, and I always say, you always have a choice too. If you want to just listen to the music and breathe for a little bit while I play the music, and let me keep an eye on the time. Actually, I'm only going to play a little bit of the song because it is short. Our time, I see our time is ripping right along, and I have quite a bit of stuff. So I'm going to just play a little bit of the song, and someone's already traced the labyrinth. So let's just trace it and just see what comes up. Just see what comes up and be open to the experience. Okay, it was a little shorter than I originally planned, but I see time is going by sooner. Going by. It's going by. So if you wanted to share anything in the chat that came up with you, we might not have time to read them all, but for people to share and see what came up with you as you thought about what you experienced in that time, or you thought about Labyrinth as a journey with dementia, and doing, again, just breathing.
Kathleen says, my husband hasn't forgiven me for stealing his car 3 years ago. He writes notes about how much he hates me. And I remind myself that it's just the disease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kathleen. I'm going to move on to this, because I think this is going to be resonate with many people. It's about emotions and the emotions that accompany anticipatory grief are similar to those of any loss, but they can really be like even more like a roller coaster. And of course, keep in mind that everyone grieves differently. But you might experience sadness and tearfulness, anger, fear about the impending changes and death, desire to talk, loneliness. I think dementia can be terribly isolating. And yet again, you can build your own community of support around that in some cases. So it's a both and, right? Guilt, anxiety, rehearsal of the death. I did that with my mom a lot. And you can have some physical problems, whether it's from the anxiety, stomach issues, heart issues, or just from taking care of somebody. So I'm going to show you, this is called the tangled ball of emotions. And originally, throughout the 1960s, it was used in nursing to help people. And they had denial in the center and a bunch of words about different emotions. But I've taken all the words out and left it blank. Here's all these lovely emotion words for folks. And you might want to just look at those words and think of a couple that if you had that tangled ball in front of you, you might be feeling right now. And I want to also say this about numbness, this because I learned this when I took that trauma workshop I just finished, that trauma series, that numbness is an intelligent function. A lot of times we're saying, oh, you're numb, you're not feeling anything, you need to get through that and feel X, Y, and Z. But numbness is an intelligent function. It tells us we are overwhelmed and need space to process and to slow down. So if you're feeling numb, please don't be shoulding on yourself that you should be feeling something different. If you're numb, it's for a reason, that you just need space. Okay. So anyway, here's a list of some feelings. So look at those for a couple of minutes, or a minute or so, and see if any of those are resonating with you. Just in this moment, just as we're going through this presentation, if something's coming up for you, if you had that ball of emotion in front of you, what you might drop in on those threads. And then maybe type 1 or 2 in the chat. Remembering to breathe.
John says that I realized I was on the labyrinth with no idea where. After 6 years, am I at the beginning, the middle, or ? And that has to be okay.
Oh, lovely, Dawn.
Tim says, I see where we are and where we hope to go in the time remaining. In the third quadrant, I began to feel the reality that disappearing would soon become the new reality. I see the potential length of the last quarter and I enter the chamber surveying the great wonder of her and our life together. Somewhat terribly, I remain there for now.
Beautiful.
Susan says, I made 13 turns, one for each year he's been affected, and pause wondering how many are left.
Wow.
Kathleen says, abandonment. I waited so many years through his career to spend time with him, and now he's not here.
Mm. 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 Wow. So much depth. Thank you. Thank you. Mm.
Michelle says, I feel for my mother who remembers early years with my dad, and now she has no idea he's been gone 4 months today because other siblings don't feel she should know if she's only going to forget.
Mm. Oh, it's a difficult choice. Mm.
Sue says, my experience of caring for a dementia victim includes joy and pleasant surprises when the old Mike shines through. He tells a joke that's actually funny or remembers something I didn't think he would. Of course, those positive moments put the hard times in higher contrast, but I wouldn't give them up.
Mm. 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 Thank you. Mm. 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 It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And again, check in with yourself, check in with your breathing. Do that kindness check in, that gentleness check in, that you're being kind and gentle to yourself as you're going through this.
Mary says, I can feel any of these things except vindictiveness, thank goodness. The I is still there.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. That's why it's a long list. You don't have to feel them all. Oh, go ahead. Mm.
That's it for now.
Okay. So, the losses, unanticipated and anticipated. So sometimes your friends don't know how to talk to you. You lose connection to friends. You may have found your world has become smaller, or your friends or other friends that have relatives that have dementia because you can speak the same language. So you have a shift. You lack energy because let's face it, it's exhausting. It is exhausting, right? You might feel guilty about enjoying activities. So say your loved one lives in a memory care community and you used to go hiking all the time and your friends invite you to go hiking. Do you either stop doing those things or you still do them, but you don't share it with that person because you might feel guilty? So you lose that connection to share stories. Physical intimacy. Maybe you used to hold hands while you watch TV, but now that person doesn't want to hold your hand anymore, give hugs anymore, just those kind of things. You can't bounce decisions off of each other. You might fear that you'll get dementia if it's part of the family. Financial insecurity, that was mentioned, and I've read how much we're having early onset or young onset dementia now. And I think about that for families in their 40s and 50s, which are such prime earning years, and how much that's going to affect those families as they get older. Families that may have children in their teen years that are going to be dealing with this, especially. And of course, the physical demands on your body if you're the primary caregiver. Again, it comes back to that exhaustion. And I'm sure you have your own experiences of the losses that maybe someone told you, you can see this coming down the road, and then the unanticipated, the strains on family. So, Lynn, I see people are typing in there. Anything?
Lisa says, one word I can relate to right now is sadness, because I'm dealing with it right now, watching my grandma pass away. But I know she won't suffer anymore. And I miss her being there, even though I never got 5 minutes of peace in the bathroom.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
Tim says, I feel the isolation of not knowing when she's there or not. I feel inadequate to face this with grace. Gloria says, I experience multiple levels of grief, sadness, anger, fear, exhaustion, and anxiety. My husband can still talk, but he isn't able to remember most of our exchanges. Friends have disappeared. We can't touch. All the things you just said, financial insecurity, and my health has been seriously depleted.
Thank you.
Donna says, I miss my mom. She has been replaced with a sweet child.
Thank you, Donna. That's true. As a child of a person, of a parent, sometimes we become the parent of our parent. Yeah, and here's an activity. We might not take the full 5 to 7 minutes, but in the midst of being a caregiver, you can feel like a different person. And I think I've heard this shared a couple of times, and that's a kind of loss. We lose who we are, whether it be a dream of who we are, who we thought we'd be. As if we're caring for our parents, we might have thought our life was going to go off one way, and now we're caring for a parent for years, or as spouses, we thought we'd be having this kind of retirement, or whatever it might be. So we thought we were this loving, caring person who could take on anything, and then gosh, we find ourselves yelling and being resentful, and boy, that's not who I thought it was. So that's a kind of a loss. So if you have a piece of paper or something next to you, we'll just take 4 minutes. I want to keep aware of our time because we do have Q&A at the end, or even just 3, because I'm trying to think what I have left to do here. Well, I have one thing I'm going to pass over, and then if we have time at the end, we'll pick it up. So 4 minutes. And I just want to take 4 minutes and take just 1 or 2 of these I statements. So I am, or I wonder, I dream, I hope. One of these that I have listed on the screen. Or if you take it in a new direction, just write for 4 minutes. And I'll let you know when you have a minute left. And just take away your critical voice. Just keep going on the paper as best you can, or on the computer, whatever way you feel like writing. Or if you want to doodle a picture, whatever is your creative way of going. And just write. See who you find in there. And I'll set my alarm here and go. And about a minute left. And you can just wrap up the thought that you're on. And then if you want to type in the chat, maybe a line that you wrote, or if anything surprised you. And again, just do that breathing again, maybe 4 breaths in and those longer exhales out. Did someone share something, Lynn?
I have in the chat, I've lost my autonomy and stability within. Nothing makes sense.
Mm. Mm.
And then in the Q&A, do you have any suggestions on dealing with a mother who has searing deep hatred for my father now? Something that happened 17 years ago. She's misremembering the details. She even gets physical and throws things, refuses to take her medicine. Now she's even starting to get paranoid that we are giving her medication to kill her.
Oh, that's very difficult. Mm. So sitting with her in those very difficult places. So I know when I was a chaplain and you have someone, so shifting her behavior obviously is something you work with the doctors and sometimes through medication. Well, and she won't take her medication. I'm assuming you want to work with your father and with yourself. It's just a reminder that it's the, and I passed over a couple of slides. If we have time at the end, the other exercise is how to talk to dementia. So my suggestion is addressing the dementia is of course the reminder always is the dementia. That's the issue. I mean, I don't know the personal relationship between your parents. It could very well be that your parents had a lovely relationship and she may have read something in a book or picked something up in a movie and that's been the trigger, or maybe they had a difficult relationship and what stirred. I don't know what that is, but just sitting with someone in their pain, real or imagined, with your father, and just being present to it quietly in the moment when there's not physical acting out. If there's physical acting out, really, I'm thinking of situations I've been in, keeping the person that's acting out safe, but yourself far enough away, removed, so you're not in danger. And just, again, doing the breathing, journaling, writing out, letting those feelings come out on paper so they're not coming out against the person. It's maybe the best that I can offer for that. I don't, you know, without knowing what their relationship was 17 years ago. It's a difficult, that is probably one of the most difficult situations that you hear about, is when the person that has the dementia takes whatever's going on in their head and projects it out onto some of the people that they love in the paranoia. I don't know what they watch on TV, but I think maybe sometimes just limiting, making sure there's not shows with, I don't know, there's so many shows out there with that are violent, and maybe just not having that kind of stuff on the TV might be helpful. That's just my own gut. That's my intuition talking. So I don't know if that was helpful.
Hillary says, I pretend that I am numb, but I'm not.
So I wonder what's underneath the numbness then. Another emotion, perhaps? Or is that pretending for other people? I would imagine it's serving a function.
Gloria says, I wonder where is the golden key that's waiting for me to access so I can live in peace and feel at ease and alive in body, mind, and spirit.
That's quite a question. The golden key. Yeah, peace. It can be hard to find peace. I heard somebody earlier, I can't remember who it was, but said those moments of joy that came up when they found the humor, when there was a joke that was shared. Maybe peace is in those moments, at least for that person. I don't know if you can find those, Gloria, or not.
Sue says, I remember when my husband and I created an us that made our individual life experiences richer and better. I miss that.
You miss that.
Susan says, I'm very grateful my husband's confusion in memory care has allowed him to find a lady friend who he believes is me, and they love and care for each other.
Well, I love the way you frame that, because I think to me that sounds like you honor your relationship, that your relationship was sweet and sacred, in that in seeing this lady friend as you, that he's honoring your relationship. That's what I hear in that. So thank you for sharing.
That's very generous.
That is generous. This quote I have at the end, gratitude is the other hand of grief, is from Frances Weller, who's written The Wild Edge of Sorrow, one of my favorite writers on grief and sorrow. And it can be difficult to find gratitude in the midst of the grief that one goes on with dementia. So as you look for those moments, and sometimes it is only a moment, I guess I just offer this as a hope, which is what this is, right? Hope. Did I see something else pop up there, Lynn?
Yes, I miss the couple we once were, curious, respectful, loving, and grateful.
Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. Does anything else come up for anybody?
When does a person know when it's time to seek professional help?
Ah, that's a great question. Suppose, what does your intuition say to you? What does your gut say? Are you feeling like, so grief in and of itself isn't pathological. It's not a problem. However, being able to talk to somebody, a third party, sometimes who can listen to your story, that can just listen and support you and not try to fix you, can be a good way to just process your feelings. And then, of course, there are folks out there that are experts in dementia care and aging that can also offer the more medical based or psychological based solutions. So I guess it depends on what kind of help you're looking for. Obviously, hope is one of those places you go to for help. Is finding, as you go to a hope support group and you listen to other people's stories and you get to share your story. But if you're feeling like your sadness is inhibiting your ability to be with someone and it feels overwhelming, well, that might be time to find someone to just talk to. That's a professional that can help you work through a time in your life that it just, like, you feel overwhelmed and you feel stuck. We all get stuck sometimes. This is a long and this is a hard journey. I just want to affirm that.
My husband was diagnosed 6 years ago. We've been married for 41 years, and it's heartbreaking to see. I miss the man he used to be.
Again, part of that loss. Relationships are hard when we're both, when the two people or the family or everybody in the relationship is at their, we're all getting along in our normal capacity. But when someone has dementia, that puts the relationship in a whole new light, a whole new perspective. So yeah, yes, it's hard.
When is it time to put the family member in support facilities?
That, again, that would be a discussion you'd have with those you trust. You'd have to look, of course, it could be financially important. That's a good time to get a social worker, or Hope, you probably have resources on that as to folks that can help with those decision making. Is that right? Or there's family and aging. There's aging. Oh, I'm just blanking out on
the area agency on aging and disabilities.
Thank you. They can help, and of course, part of it depends on financial means. But I did like what Glenn Campbell's wife, said is, if this disease becomes too difficult to manage at home, being part of a quality memory care community should be your first choice, not your last resort. However, I'm assuming she financially had some means behind her, and I also understand that some people mentioned it's financially draining. So yeah, as we know, this is a dementia care in our society is a fragile web. It's a fragile web of care. So, but looking at your own health, if you're caring for someone in the home and you are physically, emotionally, spiritually spent, is it just respite you need? Is it longer term care you need to look at? So,
are you able to be safe, and are you able to keep that person safe?
Thank you. That's a great word. Safe is a great word to have in there. Thank you, Lynn.
So we have a comment that says, I miss all the fun times with my grandma. Mary says, it seems to be a time of letting go.
It's a great way to put it.
Tim says, there's a longing for the person she was. I want to think there's a life for me when this is over.
Hmm. Hmm. It's beautiful. Yeah, that's definitely part of grief.
My husband has become narcissistic, verbally abusive, and so forgetful he accuses me of not staying in touch.
Oh, well, that's hard when you know that you're staying in touch, and then like again, the memories shift, things, perceptions get off, and it's hard to tease out the disease from the person. No, I haven't. Yeah, I wonder if it would be helpful to make a list of the person, of their personality before, that you can just reference to go, okay, this is the person who I love or who I respect, and then say, this is dementia talking. So you can just have something to look at visually that can help with that. That just came into my head.
John says, my gratitude has to come from the full spectrum of my life. Sometimes dwelling only on my primary relationship keeps me from being aware and present to other family members, the weather, friendship, laugh, and sometimes little joys that accompany sadness.
I'd like to just say that grief is my mentor, and I've learned over the years that when I settle into grief, then I settle into joy, that the two are companions. And whether it's anticipatory grief, coupling with ambiguous loss, that the more I allow myself onto the grief journey, the more I'm allowed to experience joy. So I'm sorry we got cut off there. And I see people are starting to come back in. For those that are here now, I'd like you to do a final check-in and consider what you might like to leave in this virtual room and what you would like to take with you. Maybe it's the tangled ball of grief and all those words. Maybe it's the labyrinth, which if you go to Labyrinth Locator, you can actually walk a labyrinth. That might be something to do for your stress reduction. They're a great way to relieve stress. So think about what you'd like to take with you as you take a last time to breathe. And then here's my contact information. Please send me an email if you have any questions. I'm also happy to send you this PowerPoint at Nurture Your Journey, Dan at nurtureyourjourney.net. And I do write a blog post on grief, loss, and life transitions primarily. So you can find my blog there and subscribe to it. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And the list of resources. And there's my mom, if you wanted to see pictures of her. The one exercise we didn't have time to do was on actually writing to dementia. And I've actually had a poem that I wrote to dementia, which I don't have time to read right now because I see we're at the end of our time. And again, I just want to say thank you to everybody who was here, and thank you for your questions. Thank you for your wonderful comments and the way you engaged as we tried to do this as experientially as we could through the venues of webinar. And let me see if I can get out of the screen share so I can look at the chat. Yeah, we all got knocked off there. So let's see. Get panelists and attendees. Is that everybody? Yeah. Okay. If you Google Labyrinth Locator and your zip code, and find Labyrinth near you. There you go. I don't have the actual email handy right at the moment. Yeah, we all got knocked off for a couple of minutes. Don't know what happened.
And thank you so much for being here and for doing this presentation.
You're very welcome. Again, if anybody wants to contact me and say, yeah, your journey, that please feel free to send me an email, and I'm happy to reach out to folks. And
All
thank
right.
you, Hope, again, very much.
Thank you. And if you don't mind forwarding that the PowerPoint, we will happily share that with people.
Oh, I can do that. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, and good night, everybody. Rest well.
Good night.
Bye-bye.